Good evening, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, the marvelous Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour, well over 4 years ago now, to help people stay connected around this virtual campfire. And this month, he's letting me take over for Spooky Month. All horror, all the time. So welcome back to those of you returning, and welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. As always, we have two writers reading their own work. And tonight's readers are Douglas Gwilym and Sam Rebelein. If you're here on Zoom, feel free to chime in on the text chat. If you're here on Facebook, feel free to chime in on the text chat. Just don't get mad if no one answers you right away. We can only be one place at once, even in Spooky Month. So our first reader tonight is Douglas Gwilym. Bram Stoker Award-nominated author and editor Douglas Gwilym has been known to compose a weird fiction rock opera or two. His story Poppy's Poppy was a finalist for a Stoker in 2023, and Year 6 made Ellen Datlow's recommended reading list for Best Horror 14. He co-edits The Midnight Zone, first edition, Novus Monstrum, a collection of never before seen monsters featuring greats and new talent, in strange dark fiction. Oh, aside, Douglas, last week Gemma Files read her story from that.
Yes, and I missed it.
See, this is why we have replays, so
That's
you can
right.
watch it. So you can watch it, because Gemma is, she's a fantastic writer, but she's also a fantastic reader.
She is, yeah.
She really just channels it. And wow, it was like a Raw Head and Bloody Bones origin myth too. It was really creepy.
Yeah, that must have been intense.
So
I look forward to that.
yes, as you should. And back to Douglas's bio. He reads classics of the proto-weird on YouTube and taught at Alpha Young Writers Workshop. Put his stories in your brain at Lamplight, Shoreline of Infinity, Dark Horses, the magazine of weird fiction, Tales from the Moonlit Path, and Penumbric. Or listen at Creepy Podcast and Tales to Terrify. Douglas, welcome back.
Hey, I got to write a shorter bio.
Oh, it wasn't that long. I just had to stop and do all this like side commenting. It was
it's awesome to be back. I love to be here. I had so much fun last time I had to come. And it's Halloween. Got to get our creepy on, so happy to assist in that.
Oh, which reminds me, do you have content warnings for your creepy? In case there's a creepy that's not somebody's kind of creepy?
I don't think that's necessary in this case.
Okay. It's going to be scary, folks. It's going to be scary.
There's implied gore.
Implied gore?
In one story. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm more about the actions than I am about the result.
All right.
Okay. I'll have one more sip of tea. So this is Wooden Teeth. It was part of an advent calendar at Christmas a couple of years ago that one little publisher did, and that's insane. That was really fun. Creepy stuff all through December. This is called Wooden Teeth. Pinocchio, the boy with wooden dreams, had a really good year. And then his father, the wood carver, having exerted himself beyond all human expectation, and having experienced the impossible, or so he thought, keeled over in the wood shavings and breathed no more. It was not wholly unexpected, as he was no less than 70 years of age, but it was sad, being the eve of Pinocchio's real boy birthday. Pinocchio didn't turn back into wood in a flash of pyrotechnics, but he felt the wood in his bones, then and after. In his dreams, his knees clattered together, and the street lamps of Pleasure Island cast his jackass shadow upon the wall. That year had been wonderful, full of promises fulfilled and new promises that were not to be. If Geppetto had grown a little afraid to touch the bodies of fallen trees with his specialized chisels and blades, if fireflies looked like vengeful fairies, who could blame him? Building chairs he could handle. Making people came with responsibility, night sweats. He wondered warily if he could do the thing again. Between walks on the beach and fishing outings with the boy, now so fully assured that he was real as to warrant all kinds of fresh bad behavior, his eyes would move invariably from the dinner table to the workbench and hang in the air, haunted. How could he not wonder if it had been him, the works of his once award-winning hands, that made the magic happen? One could believe in blue fairies quite easily when they were standing before you, feet not quite touching the bearskin rug, translucence enhanced by the crackling fireplace. Now it was less easy, and the words of crickets and fireflies had descended to a proper mundane chirping, and he had to try. He had to know. 9 months after the foul whale with human teeth spat them onto a bone-strewn beach, he succumbed. For Pinocchio's sake, he did it in secret. When the boy was cutting school or smoking cigars at the back of the village square, he chiseled, shaped. It wasn't right for a boy to be alone. He needed a friend. Geppetto hoped a sister. When his head came down heavily among the wood chips for the last time, she was as complete as she would ever be. She had a gnarled half face and a squared head like a meat tenderizer. When Geppetto was good and dead, when his prayers had dissipated like cartoon smoke, she awoke and gnawed at his carcass with wooden teeth. You all right, Laura? I gotta get this thing working right. Okay. Yeah, that was wooden teeth. And it speaks for itself, one supposes. And I'm going to jump right into Howl, which is a Halloween-specific tale. It felt sudden and too soon when the darkness swallowed up the neighborhood. Don had had the better part of October to get used to it, but his head had been in a dozen other things. Now the sky was as black as a witch's lungs, stars pure and prickly as sand. He couldn't see the moon, but the clouds were moving, and the comet was there, following them as they walked. His costume was pretty good, at least. Malcolm at work had assured him there was nothing wrong with it, and he was taking that to the bank. Besides, it was a tradition that went back to his 20s, and traditions were important. Maybe dressing up as a past president was low-hanging fruit, but it usually got a laugh. The mask had the same smell as when he was 10. Cheap rubber, probably from Korea. The costume was also an excuse to wear his best suit. Not too shabby if he did say so. Josephine was delighted too. He'd had trouble pulling her away from admiring herself in the full-length mirror by the door. She was 4, and she was proud for good reason. The costume was completely her idea. He didn't remember any animated or puppet lycanthropes in her modest television diet, but she certainly seemed to understand the basics. She'd howled at the moon the whole time he spirit-gummed Muppet fur to those chubby cheeks. Even now, as they walked, she couldn't get the look of wonder off her face. She slurped it all down like it was the biggest juice box ever. Her hands moved nervously up and down the woolly bulk of her outfit, and her head pivoted to stay locked on each new costume, analyzing and working out who the person might be underneath. Teenagers tried to be firefighters and rap stars and cheerleaders. Adults squeezed their spent youth into tights and cape. There was a knight with a sword that looked heavy, real enough to lop pumpkins. lots of costumes Dawn thought a little girl couldn't possibly understand. A white cat zigzagged the path ahead of them. Josephine clomped onto each porch and shouted, "Trick or treat," with gusto. She was thrilled with the heft of her pillowcase, half full of the kinds of things she never got to eat. Don hoped he could get away with quietly disappearing some of it before she got too used to having the stuff around, save on dental bills. But he was pretty caught up in the magic himself. Cider vinegar licked the air, scorched pumpkin, candle wax, decaying leaves. Ahead, a tall street lamp went out with a pop. A minute later, Josephine caught sight of the dragon and the butterfly. "Daddy, look!" They were obviously a couple. The body language was undeniable. Dawn figured college kids in love, indulging in a last gasp of childish fun before getting back to answering all the big adult questions. They'd spent some real time getting themselves together. The effect was dramatic. Josie was fascinated. She wanted to follow them to get a better look. Dawn shrugged. It was Halloween, and she was 4. The couple turned toward an unlit stretch of houses that didn't look welcoming. Dawn hesitated, but they followed. Uneven brick led away from the thinning crowd. Pop! Another street light went out. Dawn's stomach muscles clenched. There was a sound, like a measure of music, but simple too, without harmony. Don's phone was off, and there wasn't another obvious culprit. Don rolled his shoulders, wondering if he needed to go to the chiropractor. He squinted. The street had gone dark, and a hot wind hit him in the face. His eyes fought to adjust. Joe clung to him, eyes wide and cheek whiskers blowing comically. A terrible cry of a living thing came then, and Don knelt instinctively to get closer to his daughter. It was a sound like many mouths screaming in unison, and her eyes were wide. They reflected fire. Raked leaves along the walk ignited in succession like dominoes. Foosh, foosh. The only path forward was to the base of a great creaking elm tree. They took a step toward it, and the leaves began going off like fireworks. Don's parental adrenaline kicked in, and he moved quickly. He cradled and hefted his daughter at once, preparing to run, eyes darting for the best way. But everything froze. The block pulsed like a dying sun, and a serpentine beast emerged from behind the silhouettes of the houses. It reeked of sulfur and something animal, and stretched wings wide as a biplane over the sleepy rooftops. It moved with savage efficiency. Silvery claws twitched and scraped like a chef sharpening blades. It struck a pose in midair above an old clay chimney, long neck craning as if it were listening. Authentic Dia de los Muertos figures in the next yard crawled with the light of the flaming elm. With pops like sonic booms, another figure appeared, taking them completely out of Don's line of sight. Wings translucent like crepe paper powered through the air, finessed it. They stretched taut and towering like upended trampolines, silken and supple and alive. Don and the girl, dangling from his arm, gaped in unison. The butterfly's wingspan filled their entire field of vision, and they were rocked by the wind. Twitching legs and antennae were black and alien, glistened in the firelight. The mammoth maw let out an impossible scream of distress, a high alert for danger and self-preservation. It ascended and disappeared. Returning, the lizard thing, the dragon, Dawn breathed, to center stage. Hungry or angry at being upstaged, it snorted and looped, batting at the blazing tree with tail and feet, showering sparks and dry leaves. Dawn swayed and cowered, and Joe clung close. There was a terrible contraction of coiled muscle, and the thing lurched from the fiery treetop into open sky. It's like the comet, Dawn thought dumbly. It followed the butterfly. They were alone. Fires were diminished, burning themselves out. A woman at the foot of a porch teetered, managed to keep holding the plate of Mexican sugar skulls. They were too stunned to comprehend, and the woman went back to making agitated requests in Spanish into a cell phone she held a foot from her face. They sidestepped the sizzling stink of a burning slide and playhouse combo to escape the scene. Its top was a molten plastic mass. As the festive smells returned, Don managed to talk himself out of believing what they'd seen. He walked Josephine through it. Of course it wasn't real, baby, he laughed, to show he meant it. And to avoid talking about the fires they walked carefully away from as they appeared. But that was pretty amazing, wasn't it? We're living in an age of technological wonders, right? They walked to the rhythm of the soft patter of candy drumming at the bottoms of paper bags. He tried to finesse them toward better lit streets. It was possible because she was preoccupied with her costume. In an alley, he hitched her back up so she could walk without twisting sideways. The sound, that strange sound, came again then like distant wind chimes. It was cut short by a piercing squeal. Don caught himself gripping Josie's hand too tightly. He relaxed it by force of will. But she hadn't made the sound. It continued, descending into a drowning giggle, less than arm's reach from the border of sanity. There was delight and terror in it. A female figure stood in the light of a corner house, face unreadable and plastered with curls. It was a curvaceous parody of a woman wearing makeup that looked like it had been applied by a child in the sexy nurse costume Dawn had seen at Walgreens. The buttons of little white dress were undone, and she was exploring herself with manic hands, whimpering and clacking her teeth painfully. He tried to steer his little wolf away, but she'd seen. What's she doing, Daddy? He tumbled Josephine over his shoulder and bolted. The sounds grew more animal and mad behind them. He put her on her feet. He put off her questions, said she was sick. Was she too hot, Daddy? He muttered something about poison ivy and strong-armed them back into a rhythm of ringing doorbells. He even let her have a Snickers to keep her energy up. Too late, Dawn realized their route had been circular. A young man with a buzz cut hunched on the steps of a house, dark wig between his knees, sexy nurse dress still unbuttoned. He had light stubble and a thoughtful expression, eyes swollen from crying. Dawn's pulse quickened. The night seemed to constrict around them. Muffled cries punched the air and shapes moved where they shouldn't. An impulse took him by force. Get the child home. But first get the damn costume off and into a dumpster. He clutched her with one arm, trying to be gentle, and began tugging at the woolly tuft on one cheek with the other. Daddy, the spirit gum had done its job. Daddy, no, I want to go to the big house. I can get more candy. The comet seemed to consume the space between the trees and rooftops now, like fire. Ever so close. Don's grip slipped sweatily from the girl as his head filled with mad thoughts. He put her on her feet, reasserted his grasp on her hand. It was the darkness. He knew it was nonsense, but it was also what his marrow told him. With the light shut out, under the influence of the comet or a freaking number on a calendar, you became what you pretended to be. It didn't bend to reason, but in the practical moment of wrangling a child and navigating the night streets, he didn't have the time or the precedent of questioning his eyes. Did it last? If you could find your way out of the deeper shadows for a while, did the effect fade, like with the nurse? Had the dragon and the butterfly plummeted when they got too close to the light of the moon? With a soft sound of indignation, Josephine wrenched herself free. She lurched a dozen feet, putting her face into shadow. He could see her eyes. They brimmed with that defiance which made him fear traffic, power tools, strangers. The wordless song came through the air, or his bones, again, a harmless, tinkling sound. Josephine, stop, buddy. One more word came, half-formed, to his mouth. Please. She took another step and turned her face away from him. She saw something in the darkness, maybe, that she needed. Another step, and he could no longer make out her childish woolly outline. The melody repeated, slithering closer. He lunged for her. He tripped over a tree root, and his teeth came down painfully on the inside of his cheek. The pain stunned him. He shook it off, looked all around with eyes too wide. They felt like they would burst. She was gone. He waited, knowing in his guts there would be another sound. The howl came. Not human, unless you compared it to the sounds at the beginning and the end of a person's life. It was brutal, exalted, a warning like the sounded horn of some primal hunting party. It was near, terribly near. The girl had been telling him she was hungry since they'd left the house. She'd been too fixated on candy and the excitement to have a decent supper. "I'm hungry," she'd said. The words echoed in his skull beneath the rubber mask. A shape loomed, dwarfing the shadow of a great tree. Blackness on blackness. He took a step forward, tried to see. The shape reeked like fresh meatloaf soaked in spoiled milk. The tremendous bulk breathed like it had just exerted itself or was about to. No light caught its eye, but he could feel it watching him. Don wondered if the pain would be terrible. Would he wake up in a pile of leaves when the shadows receded and the light reached him? If so, would he be dead or alive? The thing made a rumble of warning, resolute, murderous. Dawn shivered and backed away in a trembling, awkward half-run. The shape disappeared, and the night was less black. The sound of a television on in a house permeated. He moved his fingers. He could still feel the ghost grip of his daughter's hand in his. "Josephine!" He worked his hands, sobbing. A woman screamed. He stumbled in the blackness and bounced off of a chain-link fence. Clang! He couldn't look, and he was too devastated to move. But he had to get to her. He torqued his weight to right himself, got up and put one foot woodenly in front of the other, moving toward the sound of the scream and the primal one before it. On the next block, a motion sensor flicked a spotlight on, and he was looking at nothing. Wolves move fast. But then Josephine had always loved to run. An abbreviated howl came again. Don moved sluggishly toward it as if he were in a terrible dream. The shape ahead, invisible, seemed to lunge from dark place to dark place. His nerves unraveled, and a plastic fiend on a porch triggered heart palpitations. Something had overturned garbage cans in his path. A car alarm went off blocks away. Something overhead made a popping sound, and he stood in an alley in the darkness. The serpentine sound came once again. This time, it came for him. The change came, leaving him feeling exactly the same. He looked down at his hands, gray in the twilight. Nothing was different. The October air grew playful and whispered against his cheeks. He breathed easily. The pressure of the rubber mask was gone. He blinked and ran his hands over smooth cheeks, more clean-shaven than he'd been. He felt a weird thrill rising in his chest. 43rd president, was it? A high window suddenly cast a narrow channel of light above him. He looked up at it and lost his balance, slipped, scrambled, and fell, the unmistakable smell of smashed pumpkin filling his nostrils. The wet mess splashed him and slicked his palms. He scrambled to right himself and wound up on his hands and knees. The seam of the pants of his good suit split. He stopped struggling to compose himself and found himself squinting into bright light. "I told you to stop, boy," came a hoarse voice. Don blinked. Someone had opened the window above. A baby was crying. There was a rush of wind and motion behind him, and something slammed into him. He was already stunned and shocked and galled, and then another something came down heavily at the base of his skull. Don fell face first into mud and pumpkin ooze and lost his mind to the moment. He could not think where he was or what it could mean. Two men in dark blue pinned his arms behind his back and dragged him to a car. Doors slammed almost in unison. His head throbbing, he scanned the horizon for the dark shape of his daughter. As the squad car pulled out onto the street, its headlights passed over a woman, half of a woman. Only lower legs and torso sprawled in the entrance to a closed-looking convenience mart. Everything above the waistband was red and white and glistening. Everything stopped there. "Now that's a good one, Ray," said the throaty officer. "People sure do work hard on Halloween." Guffaws. Don looked out into the gray through tinted glass, waited to feel rubber against his cheeks again. He knew the house. He also knew the neatly cuffed jeans and practical shoes of his daughter's preschool teacher, Mrs. Johnson. Some changes, it seemed, didn't disappear with the application of light. Thanks for listening, guys.
That was something.
Man.
Right? The look in your eyes, Daniel, right?
Yeah. Yeah, seriously.
It was really fun and kind of rollicking, and then
Yeah.
well,
I
I
haven't
think
read that one for an audience in a long time. And it's one of those that you read and you go, "Oh, I did that, did I? Yeah, all right." Rolling with it.
Yeah, I got a few of those. That was awesome. That was so good.
yeah, it
I'm
was.
glad you enjoyed it.
But I don't think I'm dressing up for Halloween now. Well, it is our way at Story Hour to take a moment between the readings and just let the first story sink in and ready ourselves for the next. I like to do this with a breath. Everyone, that was Douglas Gwilym. And our next reader tonight is Sam Rebelein. Sam Rebelein teaches and writes in Poughkeepsie, New York. His work has recently appeared in the anthology Where the Silent Ones Watch and is forthcoming in the anthology Winter in the City. His novel Edenville was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award and a Wonderland Book Award. He has 2 more books coming out next year, a collection of interconnected stories called The Poorly Made and Other Things, and a novel set in the same fictional world called Galloway's Gospel. For more about Sam's work and pictures of his smelly old dog, who's really cute, don't let him fool you. The dog is really cute. Follow him on Instagram at RebelSam94. Sam, welcome back to Story Hour.
Hey, thank you for having me. Listen, Truman is a stinky boy and he knows it. He's a stinky old man.
But you can't smell it on Instagram.
That's true. That's why I'm telling you, so you know. No, he smells very good. I tell him stinkiness is a state of mind. You know, he's just a stinky boy, but he actually smells quite good. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, right. Like some pets just like you're a stinky little guy. But speaking of dogs, I'm gonna read a couple shorts tonight. And the first one, a dog and some kids get killed off screen. So that's my sort of content warning.
Thank you for letting us know that.
Yeah, I also want to give a shout out. This story appeared in a little publication called Trash to Treasure, and their whole shtick is that they publish stories that you're having trouble getting published somewhere else, or you're not quite sure if they're fully there. So this story sat around for, I don't know, not that long, like maybe 6 months, and it got rejected from a few places. And then I heard about Trash to Treasure, and I was like, you know what? I think there's something sort of missing from this story, and I don't know what it is. So maybe reading it now, I'll be like, this is great. I don't know why I thought that. No notes. Or maybe I'll see exactly what the thing is, you know. But anyway, just wanted to give a little shout out to Trash to Treasure. and you get to include a picture with your publication. So I'm going to throw the link into the chat so you can see the picture at the bottom of the story. But this one is called Garage Sailing. It drove up to the sail on Columbus. It was wearing a man's face today, the kind of face made malignant by chewing gum, the kind of face that hides behind sunglasses, not the kind that simply wears sunglasses. This face had a silver earring in one ear. It drove this face's truck to the sail on Columbus on a bright clouded day in early June. It smacked its gum as it grumbled the large engine of the black Ford up to the stub of driveway. A middle-aged mother and her buzz-headed dork of a teenage son sat at the head of the driveway. She was reading a book on her pink Kindle. He was on his phone. It rolled down its window, smacking its gum with a grin. Hiya! Mother and son looked up and smiled. Hi, how are you? Hey, you got any Hot Wheels? Then the wide black barrel appeared over the rim of the open window, poked its head out into the daylight. Thump! It launched a grenade up the driveway. It drove away laughing, smacking its gum as the mother and son burst in opposite directions behind it. The mother they'd have to identify by teeth. It cruised up the arterial for a ways until it came to the next bright sign, yellow-green neon pointing down Milwaukee. 96 Milwaukee Drive! It cranked the wheel as it sang to itself so it'd remember where it was going. 96, oh, 96. By the time it reached 96 Milwaukee Drive, the clouds had shifted. The sun was burning a hole through a thin gray sheet that maybe threatened rain. 96 Milwaukee Drive had a spindly driveway that wove around to an open garage in the side of the house. 3 young kids sold lemonade out of a small plastic stand at the end of the driveway. It rolled its window down, smacking its gum. Lemonade? The tallest child asked. Sure thing, it said. By the way, you have any old tools? Then thunk went the barrel of the gun. It drove away laughing before the moms back in the garage had realized what had happened. It cruised for a while, yada-dum, da-da-da-dum, from neighborhood to neighborhood. It heard sirens wailing over the summer breeze, and one time, yow! A cop car flashed lights behind its truck. It pulled over, gnashing its gun, but the car drove around it, sped away to a pillar of smoke rising in the north. In its aimless cruising, it had almost driven back to Richards Ave, where it had exploded a family and a golden retriever that morning. Whoopsie, it said as it pulled a U-turn on Vero. Halfway through the turn, it saw the big white sign. 1171 Muriel Way, it sang as it turned on its blinker. A very hunched old woman met it at the door of the estate sale. It had the gun in one leg of its jeans with the intention of asking, You got any air fresheners? Then lifting its leg to pretend to fart, and boom. It waited for the opportune moment. She showed it the curio cabinet filled with millions of tiny ceramic jugs. Ooh, yes, very nice, it rasped, grinning and smacking its gum, eyes swirling around behind its sunglasses. She showed it the rows of Norman Rockwell paintings filling both walls of the hall. Ooh, very good, yes, yes. Then she led it into the sunroom and introduced it to Albert. It stood in the doorway, eyeing Albert, smacking its gum. Hello, it said, taken aback, eyes slowing from their normal twirl to a chameleon crooked twitching. How are? Yeah. Fred got him at a flea market, the woman explained, wobbling behind it. I don't know why anyone would want a full-size doll man, but Albert was, in fact, a strange item, a life-size Muppet rendering of an old bald man. He sat in the maroon chair by the window, drenched in gray sun. He had a mopey puppet grin drooping off his mug. One hand gave a lopsided thumbs up. His legs were withered cotton things. He's very handsome, it said. Don't you agree? Yes, but I don't think... Joyce? Another hunched old woman emerged from the kitchen. You're not selling Alfred, are you? Albert, the kitchen woman croaked sharply. We're not selling Albert. Well, maybe I didn't want to buy him, it snapped. Maybe I didn't want to buy it. He scared the hell out of me when Fred brought him home, the kitchen woman squawked. He shouldn't be sold. He should be burned. Burned, the word made it wince. Oh, you think the stuffed man ought to be burned, eh? It growled. Fine. It left the house quickly, limping to its truck in the driveway. It leaned against the truck door, pulled the gun awkwardly from its jeans. Fucker! It swung the gun up and thunked a grenade through the window of the sunroom. The grenade punched a hole through the glass, landed at the kitchen woman's feet, then burst. It grunted into the truck and roared away from the house as screams billowed from inside. As the sun began to sink, it treated itself to beers at a dive bar up the road. For several minutes, a middle-aged woman eyed it from across the bar. It ordered her a drink. It took the woman out behind the bar. It kissed her and forgot all about old stuffed Albert. It forgot that it wasn't a real man. It forgot it deserved to be burned, apparently. It was about to leap bodies, ditch the man face, and run around in a lady for a while, for a change of pace, but when it prodded at her with its tongue, she prodded back. It was so surprised it instinctually split its face, allowed the skin to curl down in ribbons as its true face floated up. She didn't scream. She didn't tell it that it should be burned, didn't make it feel worthless like the junk people bought at garage sales for a quarter, didn't sell it away like Mother It had done when it was young. When Mother It had found out it was an it, not a real boy at all, when she'd called it never human, just bloody, wormy cotton, pretending to be my son. No, this woman peeled her mask like a banana, revealing the slim gray skin of her true face, too. It blinked and laughed, shook its head in awe. You're an it. She laughed too. I've never met someone like me. Same, baby. It kissed her more with its real mouth, which it had never used to kiss before, and then it asked, Hey, you want to do something crazy? Always. They got into its truck and drove to Albert's house, sliced through the police tape with her butterfly knife, then pulled Albert's disemboweled half corpse from the burnt wreckage of his home. The following afternoon, they propped Albert's ragged top half in the passenger seat of the black Ford. She sat behind it, sucking on its earring as it drove them from sail to sail. It eyed Albert's limp thumbs up, dangling out the window at its side. Fuck families. Violence was how you made friends. So, yeah, Albert was a real item that I found at an estate sale, and this story was really born out of holding a garage sale with my mom. We love garage sales,
They're awesome.
and they're the best. But I thought we're so exposed here. You know, we see all these horror stories on the news about shootings at malls and schools and all kinds of places. And I was like, what is really stopping somebody from driving up right here? And so I took that very scary thought and just sat down watching over the yard sale and wrote this out. Um, but uh, but yeah, so that's garage sailing.
I saw it. I followed along a little and I saw a picture of Albert.
Yep. Yeah. So that particular garage sale was like a neighborhood yard sale. So Albert was in an estate sale a couple houses down that day. So it was sort of the confluence of the two thoughts. The weirdness of Albert and the scariness of living in a gun country. That's the title to a whole other story right there, gun country.
Right.
But
So, did you bring Albert home with you?
no, I don't think he was for sale actually.
So he could be anywhere.
He could be right behind you. What's that? Would you say, Daniel?
Oh, I just said true. He could be anywhere.
Oh yeah, yeah.
If
That
you're
actually
watching, call in.
Yeah. Has anyone seen Albert?
Albert.
That actually feels like a great segue. The fact that he could be anywhere feels like a great segue into the next little short that I want to read, which is called "We Never Went Away. We Just Hid Better." Um, let me wash down the it voice a little bit.
I thought it was a good Beetlejuice.
Thank you. He started to come up. Well, whatever. I could talk about that story a lot, um, but okay. So this is a story that I had in Gamut magazine back in January, which feels very long ago. But this one is called "We Never Went Away. We Just Hid Better." You know about the uncanny valley? He asks. It's one of those questions where your answer doesn't matter. He's going to explain it to you anyway. He's already mansplained a number of things to you tonight, including the end of Inception, which is the reddest of flags as far as things men can mansplain go. But he did make a good case for how Leonardo was in a dream the entire time, and it actually did make you want to rewatch the movie for the first time since 2010 in spite of yourself. Still, there's another more confident you out there somewhere. She went home alone after this Hinge date. She got a Sprite and a bag of Flamin' Hot Funyuns from the bodega, and she's watching you at home at this very moment. She already has her bra off, and she's taken a way too big hit off her pen. It's not too late to be her. You know, the bodega's open 24/7. But here you are, walking up the dim, flickering stair of this guy's apartment building. Why? Is it because he's actually really cute and strong looking and you're curious to see how he handles you? Because it's been a while since you hooked up with anybody and actually you've eaten a lot of Funyuns recently because you already shaved your legs, so why not? But why him? Why do you continue letting him talk at you while he holds open the door to his apartment? Why do you put your back to him, your shoulders tense as you step inside? Why do you step inside? Can I get you anything? He asks, locking the door behind you and slipping a key into a pocket. Just water, you say. You got it. He flicks on a light, and the apartment is disarmingly cozy. Exposed brick, strings of yellow Christmas lights, IKEA furniture, and, oh yes, a bespoke poster for Inception, all dark colors and angular lines. He must have gotten it off Etsy or something. He has a bookshelf, and at a glance, you can see Jane Eyre on there, House of Leaves, Watchmen, The Lighthouse, probably books he kept from college. You can't imagine he'd read Bronte on his own. But it's a good sign, either way, that he has books. So he opens the freezer, takes out an ice tray, cracks it, starts plunking cubes into a glass. So the uncanny valley is that unsettling feeling you get when a face is close to human, but not fully there. He sticks the ice tray back in the freezer, opens the fridge, pulls out a Brita pitcher, all of this with his back to you. It happens a lot with AI faces in movies, characters in video games. Faces are a little too long, a little too big in the eyeballs, the teeth look weird, they're animated funny. Here. He turns, hands the glass to you, smiles. It's a handsome smile and surprisingly humble, none of the gusto he had back in the restaurant. Maybe you're misreading him. You take the glass of water, offer a tight, quick smile in return. He walks over to the dining nook, shrugs out of his coat, kicks his shoes into a corner. If he was a gentleman, he would have offered to take your coat too, or at least tell you where to put it. Instead, you're just standing here in his entryway, fully clothed, disarmed by a glass of water. You sip the water just to be polite, but you're not going to fucking drink it. There could be anything in those ice cubes. In fact, why are they so long? Don't they look overly long? His cube tray must be really wide. You blink hard, look around the room again. Actually, now that you're giving it a closer look, that Inception poster has a typo in it. Insipon, it reads. You roll the name over your tongue silently to yourself in your head. Insipon. It sounds like a lesser demon, a lieutenant of hell or something. Insipon. The thing that gets me about the uncanny valley, he says, unwrapping his scarf from his neck, is like, why does it freak people out? Why does it make you afraid when faces are familiar but slightly different? What is it about the uncanny valley that makes it so unsettling? He's unzipping his hoodie, rolling his arms out of the sleeves. He drapes it over the back of the chair with his coat and then starts unbuttoning his flannel. You know what I mean? Keep looking around. You'll see that the spine of Jane Eyre is uncannily valleyed as well. Genere, it reads. Almost the same, but not quite. The edges of his coffee table seem to curl up into spikes. The human mind is all about pattern recognition, he says, taking off a pair of socks. Evolutionarily, you get spooked when you see shadows move in a way that you can't immediately identify because it means an animal could be sneaking up on your camp. That shadow slinking along could be a bobcat or a tiger. People are afraid of spiders and snakes because the way they move is wholly unnatural to you. It's all about survival. He unrolls another pair of socks from his feet. Was he always wearing this many clothes? The couch seems to have a spine along its middle, running from armrest to armrest. The Christmas lights are flickering like living flames. None of the bricks are in straight lines. They're all bent and diagonal and arranged in odd shapes, not rows. The floor feels uneven underfoot, even though when you look at it, it looks perfectly flat. So why is that? He asks as he unbuttons the sleeves of another shirt. What happened to humans hundreds of thousands of years ago that taught them on an instinctual level to be afraid of things that look mostly human, but not entirely human? What is the human mind warning you about? I don't know, you murmur, gazing at the 8 doors of the fridge. You blink and there are 5 doors, blink and there are 9. How many windows are in this room? Can you tell? It's too dim, too bright. Exactly, he says, pulling the shirt off his arms. You don't know. It's almost like there was some other creature out there that you learned to be afraid of. But why? Who used to attack you in the night? I don't know, you say, your voice getting wet with a sob in the back of your throat. The ice in your glass is starting to rattle as your hand shakes. He sighs sadly. Well, that's my whole point. Nobody remembers why. That fear is buried so deep you barely know it's there, but it still is. It's a shame, this uncanny valley between us. Why are you telling me this? You ask as you start backing toward the door, which you know is very locked. Because, he says as he grips the corner of his jaw, I don't want you to be afraid of me. He begins to unbutton his face.
Oh man, happy Halloween.
Oh my God.
It's a fun one.
Just a little monster looking for a human connection.
Just looking for love, you know?
In
Yeah.
all the fun places.
Yeah.
And if he just, eats people's faces or something, that's just not part of the story.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Ugh.
Well,
Daniel, go on, Sam.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Daniel, we've seen such different kinds of horror tonight.
Indeed. Yeah.
And what I love is that these stories didn't stay at the ratcheted up horror level the whole time. Started kind of slow and sneaked us into it, and then maybe things are okay. And then, oh, hey, no, they're not. So it was cool the way they
Cool.
kind of coaxed us into.
Great work, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
What fun.
Yeah.
Spooky month, it's the best. Well, we have a really special spooky month because it's 5 weeks of Wednesdays this October. So we have one more, and that's next week when we have M. Belanger and Nadia Volkin. So that is also going to be an excellent evening of scary stories. Now, I do recommend checking storyhour2020.com the day of the reading for any announcements, any changes, any suggestions that things around you are growing spines, or, if Story Hour ends up not quite looking like Story Hour, you'll know something's wrong. Thanks for the tip, Sam. Storyhour2020.com is also a good place to learn about anything coming up in the future. You know about next week now, but there's still November and December. Most of January's booked. And there's a lot of good stuff coming. And you can watch any programs you may have missed. Watch this one as many times as you dare through links there and at the Story Hour page on Facebook. Well, thank you very much, Douglas Gwilym and Sam Rebelein, for sharing your stories with us tonight. I'd also like to thank SIFWA for the Givers Fund grant that helps keep Story Hour going. Thank you to my co-host, Daniel Marcus, without whom literally none of us would be in this particular Zoom tonight. And thank you to all of you who are here watching tonight in Zoom and Facebook from behind the couch, and all of you watching it sometime in the future. Because as long as you watch these, it's still Story Hour, the same Story Hour, and it's spooky month forever. Good night.